Beneath the crust of our world, deeper than light dares to wander, lies a realm untouched by time. A place spoken of only in whispers, the Luminar Caves. For centuries, they existed only in myth, stories told by travelers of glowing walls and rivers that shimmered like stars. But now, a new discovery is about to unveil their truth. Tonight, you and I will descend into the light beneath the earth. Hello fellow adventurers, and welcome back to the channel. What you just heard wasn't the opening to a fantasy novel, but the echoes of a legend that has haunted geologists and explorers for generations. The Luminar Caves, supposed subterranean network where minerals glow with an otherworldly light, creating a self-sustaining ecosystem of bioluminescent flora and fauna. For most of modern history, these tales were dismissed as folklore, the result of oxygen deprivation or wishful thinking by lost cavers. But what if I told you the myth is real? Just 3 months ago, a remote seismic survey in the largely unexplored Patagonian region of South America detected an anomaly, a massive, hollow structure, far larger and deeper than any known cave system on the continent. The readings were so unusual that they were initially flagged as equipment malfunction, but a follow-up expedition, led by renowned geologist Dr. Aris Thorne, confirmed the impossible. They found an entrance, hidden behind a waterfall and sealed by what appeared to be a rockfall from centuries ago. What they discovered inside is about to change our understanding of the planet forever. Getting access to this story wasn't easy. The site is now under strict international protection, but our team was granted exclusive, albeit limited, access to Dr. Thorne's initial field notes, audio logs, and a handful of declassified images. So, grab your virtual headlamp, because we're about to piece together one of the greatest discoveries of our time. The initial descent was treacherous. The team had to navigate a narrow, vertical shaft for nearly 1,000 feet. The air grew thick with moisture, and the only sounds were their own breathing and the constant drip of water echoing in the vast darkness. Dr. Thorne's first audio log captures the tension perfectly. He describes a feeling of profound isolation, as if they were entering not just a cave, but another world entirely. After several hours, they reached a vast antechamber, and that's when they first saw it. A faint, ethereal blue glow, pulsing gently from the far wall. It wasn't a reflection, it was the rock itself. They called it luminite, a previously unknown crystalline mineral. Unlike phosphorescent minerals that need to be charged by an external light source, luminite generates its own continuous, low-level light. The working theory is that it harnesses geothermal energy from deep within the Earth's crust, converting heat into visible light through a unique crystalline structure. This single discovery was already groundbreaking, but it was only the beginning. The luminite wasn't just on the walls, it was everywhere. Veins of it snaked across the floor and ceiling, illuminating the cavern in a perpetual, dreamlike twilight. As the team ventured deeper, the single cavern opened into a network of passages and colossal chambers. One chamber, which they christened the Azure Cathedral, was so immense that its ceiling was lost in the glowing haze above. Waterfalls of shimmering liquid cascaded from unseen heights, feeding a river that flowed not with water, but with a fluid dense with bioluminescent microorganisms. This river of light flowed through the heart of the cave system, a glowing artery for a hidden world. The images we have show stalactites and stalagmites, coated in this glowing mineral, looking like giant, frozen pillars of starlight. The beauty is breathtaking, almost spiritual. But the most astonishing discovery was yet to come. This cave was not barren. It was alive. In this environment devoid of sunlight, a complex ecosystem had evolved, completely independent of the surface world. They found fungi, glowing with a soft golden light that grew in massive, forest-like clusters. These fungi seemed to be the primary producers, the base of the food chain, likely deriving their energy directly from the chemical and thermal properties of the cave. And feeding on these fungi were creatures straight out of science fiction. Dr. Thorne's notes describe large, six-legged arthropods with translucent shells, their internal organs glowing faintly. They moved slowly, grazing on the luminous fungi like subterranean cattle. Smaller, insect-like creatures with delicate, shimmering wings flitted through the air, their flight paths leaving temporary trails of light, like tiny comets. Even the water held life. The team documented blind, pale fish that navigate using electrical senses, their bodies faintly illuminated by the microorganisms they consumed. This wasn't just a cave. It was a self-contained biosphere, a living testament to the tenacity of life in the most extreme conditions imaginable. The implications are staggering. For decades, scientists have theorized about the possibility of life on other planets, in places without sunlight, like the subterranean oceans of Jupiter's moon, Europa. The Luminar Caves provide a direct, terrestrial analog. It proves that complex ecosystems can arise and thrive on geothermal and chemical energy alone. The study of this cave could provide the blueprint for how to search for extraterrestrial life. It's a paradigm shift, moving the goalposts for what we consider a habitable environment. Of course, with great discovery comes great responsibility. The immediate priority is conservation. The Luminar ecosystem is incredibly fragile. A single microbe from our world could potentially devastate this isolated environment. That's why access is so heavily restricted. The scientific community is currently developing robotic probes and non-invasive survey techniques to explore the caves further without contaminating them. We may never get to see a full, high-definition documentary filmed inside the Azure Cathedral. And honestly, that might be for the best. Some wonders are meant to be preserved, not just observed. So, what's next for the Luminar Caves? Research is ongoing, focusing on everything from the unique geology of luminite to the genetics of its otherworldly inhabitants. Dr. Thorne and his team believe they've only explored less than 5% of the known system. Who knows what other marvels lie hidden in the deeper, unexplored passages? Are there larger, more complex creatures? Does the cave system connect to a subterranean ocean? The questions are as vast as the cave itself. The story of the Luminar Caves is a powerful reminder that our planet still holds profound mysteries. In an age where we think we've mapped every corner of the globe, it's humbling to realize that a whole new world was waiting, silent and glowing, right beneath our feet. It ignites the imagination and fuels that innate human desire for exploration. The legends were true. There is light beneath the earth, deep within a remote mountain range, a place locals call Mount Arcturus, the sleeping giant. A secret has been held for millennia. It begins not with a grand entrance, but with a whisper. A narrow fissure, almost invisible between the time-worn rocks, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Those first explorers who dared to enter felt something extraordinary. The air wasn't just cold mountain air. It felt alive, humming with a soft, persistent vibration, as if the very heart of the mountain was beating around them. As they ventured deeper, leaving the world of sunlight and familiarity behind, the darkness began to shift. A faint, ethereal glow emerged, not from their torches, but from the stone itself. It was a breathtaking sight. Intricate veins of blue luminescence pulsed gently through the walls, like rivers of starlight frozen in time. The lights seemed to breathe with the same rhythm as the humming air, creating a mesmerizing, otherworldly spectacle. This wasn't just a cave, it was a living cathedral of light. With every step, the glow intensified. The explorers noticed the source. Crystals, but not any crystals known to geology. These were perfectly formed, growing in geometric clusters that defied natural formation. They seemed to absorb the ambient darkness and radiated back as pure, soft light. Touching one sent a tingling sensation up their arms, a connection to the energy that permeated the entire chamber. It felt ancient, intelligent, and profoundly peaceful. The air grew warmer, carrying a scent like ozone after a thunderstorm, clean and electric. Further in, they reached a vast cavern, a chamber so immense their lights couldn't reach the ceiling. Here, the spectacle was on a celestial scale. The entire cavern was a city of light. Massive crystal formations, some as tall as ancient trees, rose from the floor and hung from the ceiling, all pulsating in a synchronized, slow, rhythmic dance. The blue light was now joined by soft violets and gentle greens, swirling together like a captured nebula. The humming sound was stronger here, a deep, resonant chorus that seemed to speak in a language older than words. At the heart of this cavern lay the source of it all. Floating a few feet above a perfectly circular stone platform was a single, flawless crystal sphere. It was about the size of a human head, and it shone with a pure, white light that dwarfed all the others. Swirls of energy, like miniature galaxies, moved within its core. The air around it crackled with power, yet it felt completely serene. It was clear this was not a geological formation. This was something constructed, something with a purpose. The explorers, drawn by an irresistible curiosity, approached the platform. As they drew near, the light from the sphere intensified, and the humming coalesced into a series of melodic tones. Images, faint and dreamlike, began to flicker in their minds. They saw star-filled skies unlike any they knew, alien landscapes, and beings of light, moving with grace and purpose. They weren't just seeing images, they were feeling emotions, a sense of profound discovery, of creation, and a deep, abiding loneliness. The sphere was a repository, a library of memories from a civilization that had reached the stars. It was a beacon left behind, not as a warning, but as a welcome. The sleeping giant wasn't just a mountain, it was a vessel, a sanctuary built to protect this archive until someone was ready to find it. The crystals weren't just rocks, they were the hardware of a living computer, powered by the planet's own geothermal energy. The narrative it shared was one of a race that had transcended physical form, becoming beings of pure energy. Before they departed this galaxy, they left behind this archive, a gift of their knowledge, their art, their history, for any who might follow. They wanted to share the beauty of their existence, to let the universe know they were here. The Mount Narcoris was chosen for its unique geological stability and energetic properties, the perfect cradle for their legacy. The explorers realized they had stumbled upon one of the greatest discoveries in human history. This wasn't just a cave of pretty lights. It was a first contact, a quiet, patient greeting across eons. The humming of the mountain was its voice, the glowing veins, its neural pathways, and the central sphere, its heart. They were standing inside a message in a bottle the size of a mountain, tossed into the ocean of time. They spent what felt like days in the cavern, yet time seemed to flow differently there. The sphere communicated not in words, but in pure understanding, sharing complex scientific principles and philosophical concepts as easily as showing a color. They learned of their mathematics based on crystalline geometry, their art created from sound and light, and their understanding of the universe as a single, conscious entity. Leaving the cavern was one of the hardest things they ever had to do. As they walked back through the glowing passages, the light seemed to dim slightly. The humming softened, as if the mountain was bidding them a gentle farewell. When they finally emerged from the fissure, blinking in the harsh sunlight, the world seemed smaller, quieter. The silent, ordinary rocks of the mountainside now felt dull compared to the living, breathing stone they had left behind. They knew they couldn't share this discovery with the world knots. Yet, humanity wasn't ready for such a profound revelation, so they sealed the entrance, camouflaging it to be forever hidden once more. Becoming the new guardians of the sleeping giant, they returned to their lives, forever changed, carrying the light of a distant star in their hearts. The mountain sleeps on, waiting, its silent, luminous song continuing in the dark, a promise of a future where we might one day be ready to listen. The air was still heavy with the scent of ancient stone and damp earth. As they stepped across the threshold, the darkness shifted. It didn't just recede from their headlamps, it seemed to part, to make way for a new kind of light. A faint, ethereal glow appeared, not from their gear, but from the very rocks surrounding them. Veins of impossible blue luminescence pulsed softly through the walls, like rivers of starlight frozen in time. The explorers exchanged silent, wide-eyed glances. The legends were true. With each step deeper, the feeling grew stronger. It was like walking into the very pulse of the planet, a slow, rhythmic thrum that vibrated up through the soles of their boots and resonated deep in their chests. The air grew cooler, cleaner, carrying a strange, electric hum. And then, they reached the first chamber. The narrow passage opened up into a space so vast, so breathtaking, that it defied description. It was a cathedral of stone, carved not by human hands, but by the Earth's own memory over countless millennia. Music rises slightly low, emotional chords. Giant stalactites hung from the cavernous ceiling like crystal spears, each one glowing with that same soft, inner light. They painted the air in shifting shades of turquoise and silver, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. Light refracted through countless crystalline formations, creating a spectacle of silent, sparkling fireworks. In that moment, standing in the heart of that impossible beauty, they realized a profound truth. They weren't just in a cave. They were standing inside something alive. Soft wind flows through a tunnel ambience, with a low cinematic hum as they ventured further. Their eyes adjusted to the luminescent glow, and they began to notice more details. Along the cave walls, strange markings appeared. They weren't carved or painted. They seemed to have grown from the rock itself. Intricate symbols and patterns that swirled and shifted under the light, their edges blurring and reforming as if the stone remembered motion. One of the explorers, a geologist named Eris, reached out a hesitant hand. The moment his fingertips made contact, a low, resonant vibration spread through the air, a gentle, soothing hum, almost like the purr of a colossal, sleeping creature. The earth was speaking to them. And then, for a brief, heart-stopping second, another explorer saw something impossible, reflected in a large crystal formation. A silhouette figure of a person, made entirely of shimmering light, appeared to be walking along the far wall before fading back into the stone. Was it a trick of the light? A reflection, or was it a memory? An echo of someone who had walked these same halls eons ago. A soft choir fades in. The team began to suspect what the ancient legends had always hinted at, what the local tribes had whispered for generations. The Luminar Caves were more than just a geological wonder. They were a library of time, a physical manifestation of the Earth's memory. Every glowing vein, every shifting symbol, was a story waiting to be read. They pressed on, their mission now transformed. It was no longer just about mapping a new cave system. It was about understanding it. They entered a new section where the air was warmer, and the light shifted from cool blue to a warm, golden hue. Here, the walls were covered in what looked like fossilized flora, but each plant, each leaf, pulsed with its own gentle light. It was a subterranean garden, preserved not in stone, but in light itself. Touching one of the glowing leaves sent a cascade of images into the mind of the botanist. Ella revived flashes of a prehistoric world, teeming with life under a younger sun. She gasped, stumbling back, her mind reeling from the sheer intensity of the experience. The cave wasn't just remembering, it was sharing. Their journey led them to a vast, underground lake. The water was perfectly clear, and the entire lake bed was a mosaic of the glowing minerals, turning the cavern into a subterranean sky filled with constellations. As they gazed into the water's still surface, it wasn't their own reflections that looked back. They saw faces from different eras, ancient tribespeople with painted faces, explorers from centuries past with primitive gear, and even figures that were not quite human, all gazing back with a shared sense of wonder. The cave held the reflections of everyone who had ever stood there, a silent audience across time. The team's leader, Kale, realized the immense responsibility they now held. This place was a sacred archive, a living testament to the planet's long and complex history. To exploit it would be a desecration of the highest order. It had to be protected, studied with reverence, not greed. As they prepared to document their findings, they found the central chamber, the heart of the cave. In the center of the massive cavern floated a single, perfect sphere of crystalline light, about the size of a human heart. It pulsed with a brilliant, white glow, the source of all the luminescence in the caves. As they drew closer, the hum intensified, and the choir of voices in their minds grew clearer. A symphony of memories, emotions, and histories from countless beings across time. It was the Earth's consciousness, its soul, laid bare. They had found the heart of the world. Standing before the pulsating heart, the explorers understood. They were not just visitors. They were now a part of the cave's memory, their own awestruck faces forever recorded in its crystalline library. Their discovery would change humanity's understanding of the planet forever. They were not living asterisk, on asterisk, the Earth. They were living asterisk within asterisk. A conscious, remembering, and profoundly beautiful being. Their journey back to the surface would be a quiet one, filled with a newfound reverence for the ground beneath their feet, knowing that even the darkest depths held an unimaginable light. Deep within the earth, where sunlight has never touched, a team of explorers ventured into the unknown. They called them the Luminar Caves, a name whispered in ancient legends, a place said to hold the planet's oldest secrets. As they navigated the initial passage, a soft wind flowed through the tunnel, carrying a low, almost cinematic hum. It was a sound that seemed to predate humanity, a vibration that resonated deep in their bones. Along the cave walls, strange markings began to appear. These were not carved by hand or eroded by water. They seemed to have grown from the stone itself. Symbols that shifted and shimmered under the beams of their headlamps, their edges moving as if the rock remembered motion. One explorer, driven by curiosity, reached out and gently touched a glowing symbol. A low vibration spread from their fingertips through the air, a gentle, rhythmic pulse, almost like the purring of the earth itself. And in that fleeting moment, they saw something impossible. A silhouette, a figure made entirely of light, walking along the wall before vanishing. Was it a trick of the light? A reflection? Or was it a memory? An echo of someone who had walked these same halls millennia ago? The team began to suspect what the legends had always hinted at. The Luminar Caves were more than just a place. They were a living archive, a memory bank of the earth itself. The deeper they ventured, the more the caves seemed to awaken. The faint glow from the walls intensified, illuminating vast chambers that no human had ever seen. The air grew warmer, filled with the scent of damp earth and something else. Something ancient and electric. The silence of the world above was replaced by the constant, gentle hum of creation. Their journey led them to a breathtaking sight. An underground river, its waters glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The luminescence came from minerals unseen on the surface, compounds that had evolved in total darkness. Suspended in the glowing water were tiny, bioluminescent organisms, drifting like stars in a subterranean galaxy. With every subtle current in movement, they would pulse, with a soft light, painting constellations across the cavern floor. It was a hidden cosmos, thriving in the heart of the world, a universe unto itself. The explorers decided to make camp for the night beside this glowing river. As they laid out their gear, the usual sounds of a campsite, the rustle of fabric, the clink of metal were absorbed by the immense, humming silence of the cave. There was no echo of the modern world down here, no distant traffic, no faint ring of a cell phone. Only the pure, resonant hum of the planet. As they settled down to rest, they could feel a gentle warmth rising from the stone beneath them, pulsing in time with the low hum that filled the air. One of them, staring up at the glowing ceiling, whispered to the others, "It feels like we're sleeping inside the heartbeat of the world." That night, their sleep was filled with vivid, fragmented dreams. They saw images of primordial landscapes, of mountains rising and falling like breath, of oceans forming and receding. They felt the slow, inexorable turning of the planet, the immense pressure of rock forming over eons. It was as if the cave itself was communicating with them, sharing its deep, geologic memories. When they awoke, they felt not just rested, but changed. They looked at each other with a new understanding, a shared sense of awe and reverence. They were no longer just explorers. They were guests in a sacred, living library. Pressing onward, they followed the glowing river deeper into the earth. The formations around them became more and more extraordinary. Crystalline structures grew from the ceiling like chandeliers, refracting the bioluminescent light into dazzling rainbows. They found entire gardens of glowing fungi, casting soft, multicolored light on the cavern walls. Each new chamber was more magnificent than the last, a testament to the quiet, patient artistry of nature. The team documented everything, their cameras struggling to capture the sheer otherworldly beauty of it all. But they knew that no photos or video could ever truly convey the feeling of being there, immersed in that living light. Eventually, the river led them to the heart of the caves, a colossal central cavern. The ceiling was so high it was lost in darkness, but the chamber below was illuminated by a single, massive crystal cluster at its center. This crystal pulsed with a brilliant, warm light, the source of the hum they had been hearing all along. It was the core, the power source for this entire subterranean ecosystem. The water from the river flowed around its base, absorbing its energy before continuing its journey through the cave system. The air here was thick with energy, making the hair on their arms stand on end. As they stood in silent awe before the great crystal, the light within it began to swirl. Silhouettes formed and danced within its facets, not just the human figure they had seen before, but animals, plants, and strange, unfamiliar shapes. It was a cascade of memories, a visual history of life on Earth, projected from the planet's own consciousness. They were witnessing the Earth's dream. In that moment, the explorers understood the true purpose of the Luminar Caves. It wasn't just a place of beauty, but a sanctuary. A place where the Earth's life force was concentrated and preserved. It was a reminder that the world we live on is not just a rock floating in space, but a living, breathing, and remembering entity. Their expedition was over, but their journey had just begun. They carried the memory of the light, the hum, and the warmth of the caves back to the surface. They returned to a world that suddenly seemed both louder and less vibrant. They brought back with them not just scientific data, but a profound sense of connection to the planet. A message of hope and wonder from the deep. The Luminar Caves remained a secret, a treasure to be protected, for they knew that some places are not meant to be conquered or colonized, but simply to be known, to remind us that we are part of something far older, greater, and more mysterious than we can ever fully comprehend. The heartbeat of the world continues to pulse in the darkness, waiting for those who are quiet enough to listen. The air was still. Time seemed to drift, as if it had forgotten to move forward. The explorers slept soundly beside the glowing river, its gentle light painting their faces in soft, ethereal. The vast cavern walls around them shimmered softly, breathing in slow, silent waves of color. In that profound silence, there was a sound just beneath hearing. A deep, resonant hum, like a colossal heartbeat echoing through the very stone. It wasn't the thrum of machinery, nothing mechanical. It was organic. It was the undeniable feeling that the earth itself was alive, its pulse steady and ancient. When morning came, though no sun rose in this subterranean world, the air felt distinctly warmer. A gentle, nurturing heat seemed to radiate from the very ground beneath them. The countless crystals that had dimmed to a soft glow overnight now pulsed with renewed brilliance, their light brightening in slow, deliberate rhythms. It was as if they were responding to the explorers' presence, acknowledging their slumber and welcoming them to a new day. The caves, it became terrifyingly and beautifully clear, were aware, driven by an insatiable curiosity. They ventured deeper into the labyrinthine network. As they moved, the walls of the caves began to undergo a remarkable transformation. The stone, once rough and craggy, it was now impossibly smooth, polished to a finish that resembled dark, smoky glass. Beneath this translucent surface, strange, fluid shapes moved and swirled, like shadows trapped within a vast, solid crystal. They were mesmerizing, constantly shifting and reforming in a silent, hypnotic dance. When the beams of their light swept across these living walls, something incredible happened. Faint, intricate images began to appear, coalescing out of the swirling darkness. They weren't random patterns. There were scenes of breathtaking clarity and scope. Towering mountains, piercing clouds, vast, churning oceans under alien moons, and star fields of impossible density and color. It was as if they had stumbled upon the Earth's memory, a library stored not in books or data, but in pure, captured light. One of the explorers, overwhelmed by a sense of connection, reached out and placed a hand flat against the cool, smooth surface. The moment her skin made contact, the static images exploded into motion. It was like watching a film, projected from the beginning of time. They saw fire and water colliding in a cataclysmic birth, continents drifting and crashing together, mountains rising and eroding in the blink of an eye. They witnessed 1,000 generations of life, from the smallest microbes to colossal beasts, unfolding in complete, reverent silence. The walls were showing them history, not as it was written, but as it was remembered by the planet itself. A soft, choral tones seemed to rise from the depths of the stone, a sound of pure harmony that vibrated through their very bones. Before fading back into the quiet, ever-present hum, the experience left them speechless, their understanding of the world irrevocably altered. They were not just exploring a cave, they were communicating with a living, breathing consciousness. They pressed onward, the passage narrowing into a corridor that pulsed with a soft, blue light. Here, the hum was stronger, more defined. It felt as if they were approaching the heart of this great, telluric being. The air grew thick with an energy that tingled on their skin, a palpable sense of anticipation. It wasn't menacing, it was inviting, as if the cave was leading them, guiding them toward a central truth. Every step felt significant, part of a pilgrimage they hadn't known they were on. The corridor opened into a chamber of staggering scale. The ceiling was so high it was lost in darkness, but the floor was a mosaic of glowing flora. Plants, unlike anything seen on the surface, thrived here, their leaves and petals emitting a soft, bioluminescent light. They swayed in a non-existent breeze, their movements synchronized with the rhythmic pulse that now filled the air completely. In the center of this subterranean garden stood a single, colossal crystal, its facets catching and refracting the light of the glowing plants into a dazzling, kaleidoscopic display. This central crystal was the source. The hum, the light, the life it all emanated from this one point. As they drew closer, images began to form in their minds, unbidden. Not memories of the past, but possibilities, visions of futures, of branching timelines, of cosmic events yet to unfold. The Earth wasn't just showing them its past, it was sharing its consciousness, its awareness that stretched across the fabric of time itself. They felt a profound sense of unity, not just with the planet, but with everything. They understood that the rock beneath their feet, the air in their lungs, and the stars they could no longer see were all part of the same, singular existence. Standing before the great crystal, the explorers felt a sense of peace they had never known. The questions that had driven them, who are we? Why are we here? Seemed to dissolve into They weren't just visitors anymore. They had become part of the cave, part of its memory, part of its silent, eternal song. The stillness before the light had given way to an understanding that transcended words, a truth felt in the marrow of their bones. They had found the heartbeat of the world, and in doing so, they had found a piece of themselves they never knew was missing. In the heart of the earth, surrounded by living light and ancient memory, they were finally, completely home. As the team ventured deeper, they stepped into a chamber of unimaginable scale. Before them was a vast, open hall, a colossal dome that dwarfed any cathedral they had ever seen. At its very heart stood a monumental pillar of pure white crystal, soaring towards the vaulted ceiling like a tower forged from starlight. The air around this crystalline monolith didn't shimmer with heat, but with a palpable, crackling energy that made the hairs on their arms stand on end. And then, their breath caught in their throats. Standing beside the pillar was a figure. It was tall, with a gentle, almost human silhouette, but it was composed entirely of pure, radiant light. It remained perfectly still, yet its presence was overwhelming, filling every corner of the immense chamber with a silent, ancient power. The explorers were frozen in place, a mixture of awe and fear rooting them to the spot. One of them, in a voice barely above a whisper, broke the silence. "Is it alive?" The luminous figure offered no reply, no spoken word. But a moment later, a deep, resonant vibration began to pulse through the stone floor beneath their feet. It traveled through the air, a physical force that resonated within their chests, like the beat of a cosmic heart. And in that instant, their minds were flooded with visions, memories that were not their own. They saw breathtaking landscapes from a world long past, ancient and untamed. They witnessed magnificent cities of light, thriving in the crushing depths beneath the seas. Voices filled their minds, not speaking in words, but communicating in pure, melodic tones that conveyed entire sagas in a single note. It was a profound and staggering realization. These caves were not merely a geological formation. They were an intelligence, A vast, living consciousness that had slumbered for eons, buried deep within the heart of the earth. The crystal was its core, the light its manifestation, and the entire network of caverns its physical body. The team continued their slow, reverent advance until they were near the great crystal. As if sensing their approach, the figure of light seemed to nod, a slow, graceful inclination of its head, before dissolving back into the central pillar. The explorers, compelled by an instinct they didn't understand, knelt before the colossal crystal. In response, the lights within the pillar and across the cavern walls began to flicker in a complex, rhythmic pattern. It wasn't random, it was a language. Intricate shapes and flowing patterns danced across the stone surfaces, moving like liquid light, shifting and breathing in perfect synchrony. One of the explorers, a linguist by training, suddenly gasped. Her eyes widened as she watched the pulsating display. The patterns, she realized, weren't just visual. They were sound, made visible. It was music, but a music spoken by stone and light, a symphony composed by the planet itself. And within that silent, biswal melody, a message began to emerge, forming not in their ears, but directly in their minds. It was a gentle whisper that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the world. We are not visitors upon the earth, the message flowed through them. We are born from within it. We are a part of its memory, its life, its light. The message was simple, yet it held the weight of ages. It spoke of a unity between all things, a connection they had never conceived of. The planet wasn't just a rock they lived on. It was a living, breathing, thinking entity, and they, along with this ancient consciousness, were integral parts of its being. The music of the light swelled, reaching a crescendo of profound understanding, before slowly, gently fading back into the soft, ambient hum of the cave. When the last of the light dimmed, the explorers remained kneeling in the quiet darkness. The afterimages of the patterns still burned into their vision. They were unsure if what they had just experienced was real or a collective dream, a hallucination shared by all. The chamber was silent once more, the great crystal now just a dark monolith in the center of the vast dome. But as they finally rose to their feet, their perception of the world had been irrevocably altered. One thing was certain. They had entered these caves as explorers seeking the unknown, but they would leave as messengers. The Luminar Caves had spoken, and its voice would now echo through them. They carried its ancient truth back to the surface, a truth that would change the course of humanity forever. The world was not just their home. It was a part of them, and they a part of its silent, starlit song. The message of the caves as they knelt before the crystal pillar. The lights began to flicker rhythmically, almost like language. Shapes and patterns danced across the walls, flowing like water, shifting like breath. One explorer began to understand. The patterns weren't random. They were sound made visible. Music, spoken by stone. Soft bell tones, gently melodic pulls. And in that melody, a message emerged. A whisper from the heart of the world. We are not above the earth. We are within it. We are part of its light. Music swells softly, then fades to silence when the light dimmed again. The explorers stood in silence, unsure if what they had seen was real or a dream shared by all. But one thing was certain. The Luminar Caves had spoken. Fade to soft, ambient hum. Deep, slow breathing rhythm like the world asleep. The message of the caves as they knelt before the crystal pillar. The lights began to flicker rhythmically, almost like language. Shapes and patterns danced across the walls, flowing like water, shifting like breath. One explorer began to understand. The patterns weren't random. They were sound made visible. Music spoken by stone. Soft bell tones, gently melodic pulls. And in that melody, a message emerged. A whisper from the heart of the world. We are not above the earth. We are within it. We are part of its light. Music swells softly, then fades to silence. When the light dimmed again, the explorers stood in silence, unsure if what they had seen was real or a dream shared by all. But one thing was certain. The Luminar Caves had spoken. Fade to soft ambient hum, deep slow breathing rhythm like the world asleep. The explorers packed their lights, though an instinct told them they might not need them for long. They began to move again, stepping from the familiar world into the unknown. Each tunnel led them further downward, not in a steep, jarring drop, but in gentle, hypnotic spirals. You could feel the history in the smooth, curved walls, carved by water older than memory, a patient artist working over it. As they walked, the light around them began to change. The initial, faint glow, soft, warming into a rich, welcoming gold. It felt like walking through a sunset trapped underground. Then, just as they grew accustomed to the warmth, the gold bled into a soft, pale green, like the first leaves of spring. It was as if they weren't just in a cave, but moving through the very veins of a living, breathing world. Every step felt sacred, a pilgrimage into the heart of something ancient and aware. The deeper they went, the lighter they felt. It was a strange, disorienting sensation. Gravity itself seemed to be fading, its relentless pull loosening with each downward step. Their heavy packs felt like feathers. Their boots barely seemed to touch the ground. It wasn't just a physical lightness. A mental weight lifted too. The worries of the surface world, the deadlines, the noise. The endless rush of it began to dissolve into the quiet hum of the cavern. One step, then another. Their movements became a slow, deliberate dance. The only rhythm was the sound of their own breath, amplified in the profound silence. Inhale, exhale. It was a meditative beat, a drum played for an audience of stone and crystal. For what felt like hours, they descended. Time lost its meaning. Was it day? Was it night? It didn't matter. There was only the journey down, the constant, gentle spiral into the earth's embrace. And then, the passage widened. The confined space they had grown used to fell away, opening up into an emptiness so vast it stole their breath. They stood at the edge of an opening, a cavern so immense it could have held a mountain within its cathedral-like expanse. It was a space that defied all logic, a hidden world waiting patiently in the dark. They had arrived in what they would later call the Chamber of Echoes. The ceiling, lost in the immensity above, shimmered with what looked like millions of delicate crystal threads. Each one, thin as a spider's silk, caught a light that came from nowhere and seemed to return it everywhere. The entire chamber was filled with a soft, ethereal luminescence, a star field born in the heart of the planet. One of the explorers, overwhelmed, let out a soft gasp. The sound didn't just bounce back. The air itself seemed to catch it, hold it, and sing it back to them. Not as a simple echo, but as a complex, beautiful harmony. Every word they spoke became a note in an unwritten symphony. The caves were playing their voices, turning simple sounds into intricate music. They stood in stunned silence, realizing the truth. The cave was not a passive space. It was listening. It was interacting with them, shaping their sounds into music, as if it were a curious mind learning the language of its new visitors. It was a conversation without words, a connection forged between human voice and ancient stone. Hesitantly, one explorer whispered a single, heartfelt word into the vastness. Home. The effect was immediate and breathtaking. The millions of crystal threads on the ceiling glowed brighter, pulsing with a warm, gentle light. And the echo that returned was not a cold repetition. It was a soft, layered chorus, a reassuring whisper that wrapped around them like a blanket. Home. Home. Home, it sang, each repetition softer and more intimate than the last. In that moment, a profound understanding settled over them. They were not intruders here. They were not conquerors charting a new territory. They were guests, and in this impossible, beautiful place, they were being welcomed. They spent what felt like an eternity in the Chamber of Echoes, experimenting. A laugh would be returned as a cascade of bell-like tones. A hummed tune would be orchestrated into a full choral piece. The cave, adding harmonies they could never have imagined. It was a collaboration, a creative partnership between human and geology. The chamber wasn't just echoing sound, it was interpreting emotion. Their joy was turned into brilliant, sparkling melodies. Their sense of wonder was transformed into deep, resonant drones. The that vibrated through the floor and into their very bones. They began to understand that the cave was a repository of history, but not one written in books. Its memory was stored in vibration, in light, in the very structure of its being. Perhaps every sound ever made within its walls was still there, woven into the music. A library of echoes stretching back through millennia. They were now part of that library, their own voices added to the timeless song of the deep earth. Eventually, the urge to move on returned, not from boredom, but from a deep-seated curiosity. If this was just one chamber, what other wonders lay deeper still? What other conversations were waiting to be had? They left the Chamber of Echoes with a shared, unspoken promise to return. As they walked away, they could hear the cave softly humming the melody of their last spoken words, a gentle farewell. The path forward changed again. The gentle spirals gave way to a straight, wide passage, the floor now made of a smooth, dark stone that felt warm to the touch. The green light faded, replaced by a soft, pulsating blue, like the glow of a bioluminescent ocean. They felt as though they had walked through a mountain and emerged into a starlit sea at the center of the world. The feeling of weightlessness intensified. Now, they were practically floating, each step carrying them yards forward. They moved with a grace they didn't know they possessed, like astronauts exploring a new planet. The silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't empty. It was filled with a sense of anticipation, a feeling that they were on the verge of the greatest discovery of all. They were approaching the heart of the cave, the source of its light, its music, its life. The blue glow ahead of them brightened, coalescing into a single, brilliant point of light. The air grew warmer, filled with the scent of damp earth and something else, something clean and sweet, like ozone after a thunderstorm. And then they saw it. They entered a final, perfectly circular chamber. In the center, floating in the air, was a sphere of pure, white light. It was no bigger than a human heart, yet it illuminated the entire cavern. Its light, the source of all the colors they had seen on their journey. It pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm, in perfect time with their own heartbeats. This was the source, the heart of the world. It wasn't a geological formation or a mineral deposit. It was alive. It was the consciousness of the cave, the mind they had been speaking to. The explorers stood motionless, humbled and awestruck. They had not discovered a place. They had met a being of immense age, power, and wisdom. They didn't need to speak. In the presence of the heart, thoughts became as clear as spoken words. They felt its curiosity, its loneliness, its joy at their arrival. It had waited for eons, listening to the slow music of the earth. And now, finally, it had someone to share its song with. They felt a sense of peace wash over them, a feeling of absolute belonging. They had been searching for the secrets of the earth, but what they found was a connection to it, a reminder that they were not separate from the world, but a part of it. The journey down had not been a descent into darkness, but an ascent into a higher state of understanding. They had found their way home, not to a place on a map, but to a place within themselves. They were explorers no longer. They were home. Imagine, for a moment, a place untouched by time, a world hidden beneath our own. This is the story of Luminar, a realm of impossible beauty and ancient secrets, a journey into the heart of a living planet. Our expedition begins in what we came to call the Chamber of Echoes. Stepping inside was like entering a galaxy held within the earth. The ceiling, a vast, domed canvas, shimmered with millions of impossibly thin crystal threads. It was breathtaking. Each thread seemed to capture light from an unseen source, refracting it, scattering it, until the entire cavern was bathed in a soft, ethereal glow. It felt sacred, like a cathedral built by nature itself. We stood there in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity, simply trying to process the sheer, overwhelming beauty of it all. Then, one of us, perhaps unable to contain their AOB, spoke. A whisper, and that's when the true magic began. The air didn't just carry the sound, it sang it back to us. It wasn't an echo, not in the way we understand it. It was harmony. Our voices became instruments, and the cave itself was the orchestra. Every word we uttered, Every breath we took was transformed into a complex, beautiful chord that resonated through the very rock around us. It was as if the cave was listening, learning our language, and weaving it into its own ancient song. Hesitantly, another explorer whispered a single word: home. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The crystal threads on the ceiling pulsed with a sudden, warm brilliance, and the sound that returned was different. It was softer, more intimate. Home, home, It repeated, a gentle, reassuring murmur that wrapped around us like a blanket. In that moment, we understood. We weren't intruders here. We weren't trespassers in some forgotten tomb. We were being welcomed. The cave was greeting us, acknowledging our presence in the most beautiful way imaginable. Beyond this chamber of living sound, our path led to an even greater marvel. The Bridge of Light. A delicate, arching bridge made of the same translucent crystals spanned a chasm of absolute darkness. It seemed too fragile to hold our weight, yet it felt as solid as ancient stone beneath our boots. Far, far below, where our lights couldn't penetrate, a river flowed. This was no ordinary river. It was a current of pure, liquid light, moving with a slow, deliberate pace of molten stars. The colors shifted and swirled, a silent, cosmic ballet in the deep. We crossed with careful, reverent steps. The bridge itself seemed to be alive, vibrating with a low, resonant tone that we felt more than heard, a deep hum that seemed to emanate from the very core of the planet. Halfway across, one of the team stopped, his hand gripping the crystalline railing. He gestured for us to look down into the river of light, and there, within the glowing current, we saw them. Shapes, silhouettes, moving gracefully through the luminescence. There were outlines of creatures, part energy, part memory. The forms were unfamiliar, belonging to species long vanished, species that walked this world before humanity ever existed. We were witnessing the souls of a forgotten ecosystem, drifting peacefully through eternity. An inexplicable sadness washed over us. Tears welled in our eyes, though none of us could say why. It was a feeling of profound loss for something we had never known, a deep, primal grief. The beauty was so intense it was painful, a memory that wasn't ours, yet felt as deeply ingrained as our own childhoods. It was a glimpse into the planet's own soul, its own history of life and loss, and it changed us forever. We weren't just explorers anymore, we were witnesses to the sacred archives of existence. On the far side of the chasm, our journey led us to a final, sealed entrance. A perfectly circular door of smooth, dark stone stood before us, without any visible handle, seam, or mechanism. As we approached, wondering how we could possibly proceed, it began to move, in absolute, unnerving silence. The stone disc split down the middle and slid apart, revealing the chamber within. What we saw there was the culmination of our journey. The reason for the cave's song and the river's light. We had found the heart of Luminar. Suspended in the very center of the circular room, floating weightlessly above a shallow, perfectly still lake, was a sphere of pure, blinding light. It pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm, like a cosmic heartbeat. With every pulse, a ripple of energy expanded outwards, moving through the water, through the rock walls, and through our own bodies. We could feel our hearts, one by one, beginning to synchronize with its ancient, powerful rhythm. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. We were becoming one with the pulse of the planet. The air grew warm, filled with gentle vibrations that hummed against our skin. And then, images began to form within the light of the sphere. We saw primordial forests blooming and decaying in the blink of an eye. We saw vast oceans forming, churning with nascent life. We saw the very first sparks of consciousness rising from inanimate stone. We were watching a genesis. We were watching the planet remember its own birth, and it was sharing that memory with us. The visions shifted. Now, we saw people, ancient faces, illuminated by firelight, their features serene and wise. They moved with a grace that spoke of a deep connection to their world. These were the Luminar people, the beings who once lived in this world, not as masters, but as partners. They had lived in perfect harmony with the light and with the planet itself. They existed long before recorded history, a civilization that vanished without a trace, leaving only this beautiful, living memory behind. In that moment, standing before the heart of their world, we felt their presence, a quiet welcome from a people long gone. And we knew that their legacy was not one of monuments or empires, but of light, life, and harmony. This journey into Luminar taught us that some places are not meant to be conquered or mapped, but experienced. They are living stories, waiting to be heard. The explorers packed their lights and began to move again. Each tunnel led downward in gentle spirals, carved by water older than memory. The glow around them softened into a warm gold, then shifted into a pale, ethereal green. It was as if they were walking through the very veins of a living world. The deeper they went, the lighter they felt. Gravity itself seemed to fade away, one step, then another. The sound of their own breath became the only rhythm in the profound silence. For hours they descended, until their sense of time completely dissolved. And then, the narrow passage widened dramatically. They stood before an opening vast enough to hold a mountain. This was the Chamber of Echoes. The ceiling above them shimmered with millions of impossibly thin crystal threads. Each delicate thread seemed to catch light from nowhere and return it everywhere, filling the cavern with a soft, ambient glow. When one of them dared to speak, the very air sank back not as a simple echo, but as a complex harmony. Every word they uttered became a musical note. It was undeniable. The caves were playing their voices. They quickly realized that this immense chamber was listening, actively shaping their sounds into music, as if it were trying to learn the language of its visitors. One explorer, overcome with emotion, whispered a single word: "Home." In response, the walls around them glowed brighter, and the echo repeated softly, a gentle chorus: "Home. Home." In that moment, they understood they were not intruders here. They were being welcomed. The path grew brighter the higher they climbed. What had been a tapestry of blue and gold below now turned to brilliant silver and white. The air felt cool, fresh, the first hint of the world above. Through narrow tunnels they moved slowly, guided not by maps or instruments, but by the quiet pulse still glowing inside their hearts. At last, they reached the mouth of the cave. The night sky waited for them, vast, silent, and scattered with countless stars. For a long, breathless moment, they could not tell where the cave's inner light ended and the starlight began. One of them whispered, "It's the same light, the same everywhere." And it was. The light from the heart of the earth mirrored the light from the heart of the cosmos. They sat upon the cool rocks until dawn, watching as the first sunlight spilled over the distant horizon. But the sunrise looked different now, warmer, closer, as if it too had journeyed with them from beneath the ground. When morning finally arrived, they gathered their journals and their scientific instruments. But none of the readings, none of the meticulously collected samples, could ever capture what they had truly felt. The data would show mineral compositions, light frequencies, and acoustic wave patterns, but it could never describe the profound sense of being known by the world itself, of being part of something ancient and alive. That night, they made their camp at the foot of Mount Arcturus. The wind drifted softly through the tall grass, carrying the same gentle rhythm they had heard deep within the caves. One by one, the exhausted team fell asleep beneath the open sky. Their dreams were gentle and bright, serene waves of color, moving slowly through an endless, peaceful space. And somewhere, deep within the mountain, the Luminar Caves pulsed once more. A quiet, steady reminder that the light of the earth, its hidden, vibrant heart, never truly sleeps. It waits, patiently, for those willing to listen. One explorer, as if in a trance, stepped forward, drawn inextricably toward the sphere. As his hand reached out to touch the impossible, the light didn't resist. Instead, it folded around him like water, a liquid embrace. He did not burn. He didn't recoil. He simply dissolved. His form broke apart into a cascade of shimmering particles, each one a tiny star, merging seamlessly with the greater glow. Then, His voice echoed through the chamber, not with pain, but with profound wonder. It's beautiful. It's alive. It knows us. A soft, harmonic chord seemed to swell from the light itself, a sound of pure serenity before gently subsiding. The others, watching this incredible transformation, felt not fear, but a deep, unshakable calm. The heart pulsed gently, a cosmic rhythm that felt like a welcome. It wasn't taking, it was showing. It was revealing a truth they had never known, that they, too, were made of the same essential light. They understood in that instant. Every living thing, every rock, every drop of water carried a spark of this universal energy. This loop. The caves were not just a place they had entered. In a way, the caves were inside them, a part of their very being. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only moments. Time had lost its meaning in the presence of the light. When the glow finally began to dim, contracting back to a gentle pulse, the explorer who had dissolved reappeared. He stood solid once more, unharmed. But something was different. His eyes glowed with a faint, residual blue light. A soft smile touched his lips as he looked at his companions and whispered, "It's time to go home." A long, profound silence followed, broken only by the sound of their footsteps, slow and deliberate as they began to retreat. The long silence had begun. The explorers stood quietly beside the fading sphere of light. The air in the chamber was warm, yet it felt lighter now, as if the very cave had just exhaled a long-held breath. No one spoke. There were no words big enough, no language grand enough to describe what they had just witnessed. The only sounds were the soft cadence of their own breathing, mingling with the slow, rhythmic dripping of water falling into the unseen lake below. The crystalline walls still shimmered with a residual glow, but it had softened into a gentle dusk deep within the earth. They knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic, that their journey downward was complete. Now, the path must lead upward, back to the world they knew. Slowly, they turned and began to walk back through the labyrinthine tunnels, passages that had once seemed endless and menacing. Each step was slower now, heavier with the weight of their experience, yet paradoxically peaceful. It felt like leaving a dream that was still clinging to the edges of their consciousness, a dream that refused to fully end. As they began their ascent, a new phenomenon started. A low hum, like a distant, resonant voice singing from beneath the rock, filled the air. The walls themselves seemed to whisper to them, not in words, but in a language of feeling and light. The cave was singing them goodbye. As they walked, the faint light that remained on the cavern walls would sometimes gather, coalescing into familiar, fleeting shapes of face, an outstretched hand, a flash of a forgotten memory. The explorers recognized these images not as phantoms or strangers, but as reflections of themselves, of their own lives and histories, held for a moment in the stone. One of them paused, her curiosity overriding her haste. She reached out and touched the wall. The light curved gently around her fingertips, warm and alive. A profound feeling of gratitude washed over her, a feeling she knew wasn't hers alone. It felt like the gratitude of the earth itself. Every vibration, every shimmer of light, every echoing note in that subterranean song seemed to convey a single, powerful message. You have seen. Remember. The journey back was a meditation in motion. The once daunting tunnels now felt like a familiar passage, a sacred corridor they were privileged to walk. The echoes of their footsteps were no longer sharp, but seemed absorbed by the stone, becoming part of the cave's ancient silence. They moved with a newfound grace, their bodies no longer tense with the thrill of discovery, but relaxed in the afterglow of revelation. The light continued its gentle play along the walls, a final, silent story being told just for them. They saw patterns that mirrored the branching of trees, the flow of rivers, the spiral of a galaxy. It was the universe in miniature, a blueprint of creation etched into the heart of the world. They were not just walking out of a cave, they were walking out of the source of all things. Each explorer was lost in their own thoughts, yet they were more connected to one another than ever before. A silent understanding passed between them with every shared glance. They had gone into the darkness as individuals seeking knowledge, but they were returning as a unified whole, carrying a light within them. The air grew cooler, the scent of damp earth and stone becoming more pronounced, signaling their approach to the surface. The deep, resonant hum of the cave began to fade, replaced by the faint, distant sound of wind, the sound of the outside world calling them home. The first glimpse of the entrance was not a triumphant sight, but a bittersweet one. It was a pinprick of gray light in the distance, a doorway back to a world that would never look the same again. The explorer who had merged with the light paused one last time, looking back into the receding darkness. His blue glowing eyes reflected the last of the cavern's shimmer. He took a deep breath, a final communion with the silence, before turning to join the others. As they finally stepped out of the cave mouth, the pale light of dawn greeted them. The world outside was quiet, washed in soft shades of purple and orange. The air was crisp and clean. For a moment, they simply stood there, blinking, reacclimating to the open sky and the vastness of the horizon. They had been gone for days, but it felt like a lifetime. They looked at each other, and in each other's faces, they saw the reflection of their journey. There was a new depth in their eyes, a serenity that hadn't been there before. They had found more than just a geological wonder. They had found a piece of themselves, a connection to everything. The whispers in the stone was silent now, but the message was etched into their souls forever. You Ave Shan, remember. And they knew, with absolute certainty, that they would. The journey was over, but the true exploration had just begun. On the far side of the bridge, a circular door of smooth, seamless stone stood waiting. As we approached, it slid open on its own, parting in complete and utter silence. What lay inside took our breath away. Suspended in the air, above a perfectly still, shallow lake, was a sphere of pure, unadulterated light. We had found it, the heart of Luminar. With every pulse of its radiant glow, a ripple spread through the water, through the very rock beneath our feet, and even through our own bodies. We could feel our heartbeats begin to slow, one by one, aligning with its ancient, rhythmic pulse. The air grew warm, filled with faint vibrations that hummed like quiet, distant music. It was a sensation of peace, of coming on. Then, images began to form within the light. We watched in awe as entire forests bloomed from nothing. Vast oceans formed and swirled, and the very first sparks of life ignited from cold, hard stone. It was as if we were watching the planet remember its own birth. A silent movie of creation played out just for us. The vision shifted. Now we saw people, ancient faces, their features illuminated by the flickering light of campfires. These were the Luminar people, beings who, according to legend, once lived in perfect harmony with this light. A civilization that had vanished long before recorded history ever began. They weren't just images. We felt their presence, their wisdom, their connection to this place. It was a profound and humbling experience, like looking back through the eyes of our most distant ancestors. One of our team, an explorer named Kale, stepped forward, his eyes wide with wonder. He seemed to be drawn to the sphere, moving as if in a trance. He slowly raised his hand, reaching out to touch the impossible. We held our breath, unsure of what would happen. Would it burn him? Would it reject him? As his fingers neared the surface, the light didn't recoil. Instead, it folded around him, enveloping his hand, his arm, his entire body, as gently as water. He didn't burn. He dissolved. His physical form broke down into a cascade of shimmering, golden particles, all merging seamlessly with the radiant glow. There was no pain, no struggle. Just the quiet, peaceful union. Then, his voice echoed softly through the chamber, not from any single point, but from everywhere at once. It was a whisper that filled the space around us. It's beautiful. It's alive. It knows us. Strangely, none of us felt fear. A deep, unshakable calm settled over our group. The heart pulsed gently, a gesture that felt like a welcome, a reassurance. It wasn't taking anything from Kale, it was sharing with him. In that moment, we were shown a fundamental truth. We understood that we, too, were made of the very same light. Every living thing, every tree, every creature, every one of us, carries a tiny spark of Luminar within. The caves, this heart, They weren't separate from us. In a way, they were inside us all along. We stood there for hours, or perhaps it was only a few moments. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the presence of the heart. We were adrift in a sea of memory and light, experiencing the shared consciousness of a planet. It was a lesson in unity, a reminder that all life is interconnected, part of a single, magnificent whole. The divisions we create, the borders we draw, they all seemed so insignificant in the face of this universal truth. Finally, slowly, the light began to dim. The intense sphere softened, its brilliance receding until the chamber was once again filled with a gentle, ambient glow. And as the light faded, a figure began to reappear where Kale had stood. The shimmering particles coalesced, reforming his shape with the same quiet grace with which they had taken him apart. He stood before us, whole and unharmed, but something had changed. His eyes, once brown, now glowed with a faint, ethereal blue light. A soft, knowing smile touched his lips. He looked at us, his gaze filled with a wisdom that was ages old, and whispered just 2 words that would change everything. It's time to go home. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the heart of mystery. If you enjoyed this story, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more adventures into the unknown. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, stay curious.